Welcome to the Priority Lane podcast. I'll be your host today, Lawrence Dauncey. My guest today is James King of King Financial Planning. James has been in the financial services industry for almost 30 years. Started life, as I understand it, as I will call it, a refreshment executive. For those of you of a similar age, will know that he was a tea boy, and I'm sure he'll go into that. He'll go into that shortly. But so, welcome, James. Thank you very much for taking the time to chat to us.
No problem, Lawrence. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we had a nice chat a few weeks ago, and I'm glad you agreed to come on. So I'm going to kick it off. As I mentioned, you were a refreshment executive,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
believe, for Friends Provident many years ago. Is that correct?
yeah. That's not many people have ever called me that. Really, yeah, I was that tea boy. Yeah, no, it was 1989. The world was a very different place. I was gonna be a PE teacher, believe it or not. But then a friend of mine said there was a job at French Provident, and I went to meet the at that time she was the only manager of a French Provident branch, which there were 37, and that
That's
was a
right.
lady. And she was a formidable lady, a lady called Margaret Davis. And you sort of met her, and you never really said no to her. Really, that was just what happened. So from there, I'm suddenly working in this office, not knowing what I'm doing, and I walked up and down with a proper tea urn and made people cups of tea and coffee, and that was my role in life. Um,
Well,
that was the starting point.
it's not a bad start. At least you started somewhere. So, no. When we spoke a couple of weeks ago, we you made an interesting point that I noted down, and I think we were talking about initially uh, the sort of cohesive relationship between a financial advisor, accountants, and all the other professional services that you guys work with. And you pointed, it was a very good point, was do they actually know what we do?
Yeah.
So my question is, and for all the listeners, what does a week look like for a financial planner? What do you actually do?
Well, that's a good question. It changes. I mean, the beauty of this job is that it changes all of the time. So today I'm having a meeting with a big firm of accountants to try to do some work with them. I'm doing this, and then I'm off to do the ladies' AGM at our golf club. So that's my day today. Picking up some money from my charity that I'm chairman and trustee of. Um, it's changed a lot. Everything's evolved a lot over the years. I think, most financial planners that have done this job for a while, the investment piece is fairly easy. You have a thought process, you know what you're gonna do. You see a new client, you have in your mind what that will look like. I think it's more about the true value of what we do is the planning piece. It's about
Okay,
sitting down with people and saying, "Okay, this is where you are. Where do you wanna get to? How do we enable you to get there?" But then it's all the bumps in the road, and over the last 6 to 8 weeks, I've had 2 clients die. I've had 1 client that's had to go into a care home. I've got 1 client that's got, dementia and sadly needs, extra care. This is all the stuff that as financial planners we deal with, and it's nothing to do with, Donald Trump does over in the Middle East or,
right,
what Rachel Ridley does as far as tax is concerned. They obviously have massive effects. Actually
sure,
being that trusted advisor and helping people through their lives. And I think more and more now, my role is to try to get people to enjoy their money and to spend it and to do things with it rather than
sure.
wait for tomorrow because who knows where we are. And I encourage people to do that more and more. So that's,
Okay,
that is very much the role. And as I said, the beauty of this great job is that it changes every day.
okay. Would you agree that I suppose would you agree that most advisory firms are built on trust, reputation? As we discussed, the average age of a financial advisor in the UK is 58.
Yeah.
And below 30 and below makes up 5.7% only, and only 18% are women. But in terms of the advisory firms, I mean, as we did touch on, that it is built, predominantly on trust and reputation. Um, and in terms of referrals, for example, and succession, when you've had clients who passed on, how important is a client referrals in growing business today? Is it still the same? Is it got more? I mean, how is it now?
I mean, if you touched on the age thing. I think that's a really important point. I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more, but we need to bring new blood into this industry
Okay.
profession, and it is vitally important. Trust is a key thing. That's why you tend to find that advisors keep their clients for a long period of time. Everybody does all these surveys about the fact that nobody trusts their financial advisor, but they trust their own. Well, that's a bit of a strange statement, is it? But you hear that all the time, because actually people all don't trust financial services people. But apart from my one's a good one, and people tend to stay with their advisors. I've got clients that I've dealt with since the late '90s, and they
Right.
stayed with us over that time period. Coming back to what do you do all day? That changes as they get older and you do different things. But trust
Sure.
is very important. I get most of my new work comes from my existing clients. Um,
Okay.
I think a lot of other advisors are in a similar position. Getting new work is there's lots of work out there. It's whether it's who wants to do what work and at what numbers. We
Oh,
as an industry have gone from a point where when I first started, I'd have done a £50 a month PEP. Going back to, it's literally do any piece of business you possibly can. But
yeah,
the
sure.
the strange thing about, our world now is there's less and less advisors, and so people have become more and more picky. And
Right.
and you're
Okay.
in a place where RDR changed the world because suddenly people were made to generate recurring income, which they hadn't really
Okay.
done in the past. It was all, initial fee, initial commissions, get as much as you can, and then go and get another client. Whereas
Right.
the sort of the first model of 3 plus a half, what that meant was that people were starting to build up recurring income. Therefore, those advisors are suddenly, over a number of years, have suddenly got revenues coming in, and so they can be a bit more picky on who they look after and who they don't. And then you're
Right.
this whole statistic of, only 9% of people or whatever it is, something like that, actually get any advice because
Right.
the advisors that are left are only dealing with the high net worth clients, or largely,
Right.
big generalization, but it is sort of true, I went up a slight
Fair
tangent
enough.
there, but yeah, so there are lots of clients out there. We as an industry need to build trust as a bigger picture, not for individuals like me or lots of other advisors that've got great clients and deal with them themselves. We need the world to know that actually it's a pretty trustworthy organization, industry.
Sure. So for you, your referrals, or any new business come from existing clients?
Yes and no. I mean, in historically, obviously, my background is I was a partner in a firm of chartered accountants, a firm called Price
Okay.
Bailey.
Yeah.
I worked for Mac and Hudson Chartered Accountants before that. So my specialism, if I have any, is working, financial planning and the accountancy world together. So most of my clients came from the accountancy practice because I was there best part of 20 years. So
Sure.
they were referrals, but they happened to be referrals from audit partners or tax people or corporate finance people that I worked with and were colleagues, and we worked on clients together. So, you know, from a if people are trying to get new work,
Yeah.
the glossy space and professional connections, it's very boring. People have heard this a million times before. There are some great people out there. What you have to understand, coming back to your earlier point, is that a lots of the times these people don't really understand what we do. And so
Yeah.
the whole educational piece that you have to keep going through time and time again is incredibly important. And just don't
Yeah.
give up is my answer.
Yeah. It's just because it was just interesting to find out, now, um, how other advisors, how does it happen that they get new clients? Let's put aside the fact, of course, that we have you build up trust over however many years it is, and your existing clients will recommend you potentially to someone else. But for those who don't have the longevity that you do, um, yeah, my question is, how do they make it happen? How do they get new clients, new business on board?
I think there's an element, the old sales sort of stuff is you want to put as much in the hopper as you can and it starts to
Right.
filter down. And so that is going to local marketed events,
Okay.
going to being members of various clubs, Rotary types, all those types of things that are all out
Sure.
there, business breakfasts, all that stuff. But also, I do believe professional connections is a really big, strong way forward to get new business. But you have to, again, coming back to stuff that you said earlier, trust is the key word. So the accountancy profession, lawyers, others, they, because there is an underlying not sure what these guys do or what they can benefit my clients, you have to build on that. You have to go in and you have
Okay.
to, do things like CPD events, talk to some of their clients, do some stuff, some educational stuff, put on lunches, take people out, just constantly do things for the accountancy firm, the law firm, that they feel could actually help their clients, because that's the key bit.
Right.
Most of these people just want to look after their clients. That's their aim. And if you can
Sure.
keep doing that and do a good job, then eventually one or two things start to happen. They start to understand you a little bit more, and you can start to move that forward. But it's a slow process. It doesn't happen all of the time. So
No.
but it's worth doing. The professional firms have some great clients, and they do trust their advisor. They trust the
Sure.
accountant, they trust their lawyer, especially their accountants, because they know so much about them. So if the accountant puts you in front of a client, then you've got a good chance of winning some work.
So for me, I'm reading that the correlation between the age demographic that I mentioned and the trust that obviously you need, um, it puts you guys, obviously, that's why the average age is 58, because they've got the longevity, they've got the history, so therefore they've got the trust. That then, for me, on the flip side, is then makes it very difficult for the younger generation or younger advisors coming in trying to build that trust,
Yeah.
because the majority have already got, have already kind of taken a big slice of the pie. So,
Yeah. Well,
in terms of that,
yeah.
how would the younger generation, how can they break into it? And, what about encouragement from, obviously, likes of yourself and, and other, senior peers in the industry?
Well, if you go back to my early days as Friends Provident, there were 37 branches of Friends Provident. Standard Life had the same, and the Scottish Equitable had the same, and Scottish Gamma Club had the same, and Norwich Union had the same, etc., 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 etc. Insurance companies everywhere, and the banks did financial services. Barclays went in, then came back out again, then went back in, and come back out again. Coots, NatWest, all of these people had huge organizations that did financial services, and it was the breeding ground. I'm the prime example. Lots of people of my age started at a bank, or they
Right.
started an insurance company. The
Yeah.
issue we have now is that, in the 90s, the contracts were terrible. Okay, there was lots of fat in it, and everybody made loads of money. Yeah, so you had lots of people running around. You can employ loads of people, and the service was brilliant, but the contracts were terrible. You look
Okay.
at today and the contracts that people have got compared to the 90s, the end user is paying peanuts compared to what they would have paid in the 90s.
Okay.
Therefore, the insurance companies aren't in this world anymore because they can't make any money out of it. And so there's no breeding ground for new people to come on board, no people to
Ah,
cut their teeth and understand. So this is where we've ended up with this issue, because advisors like me only deal with high net worth clients, or more and more people at that end. So
sure.
you this big problem, and we need the big guns, the quilters, the St James's Place, the banks, to come back into this smaller market to put academies together. But it's not just about that. I listened to Kathy from the Verve Group recently, and they do quite a lot about bringing new people on, and they had some stuff going on with bringing new recruits and training them up. And they've got loads and loads of people want to do it. Problem is there are no jobs. Yeah. So it's not necessarily there aren't the people, it's actually the roles within it. And it sort of comes back
Okay.
to my point, because those roles aren't there. And our financial planning industry is a cottage industry. There's loads of advisor, three advisor firms, one in my case now, sort of gone from one
Yeah.
extreme to the other. Um, and so it's very difficult for somebody to take on a trainee or take on somebody that doesn't have any clients. It's only the really big guys that need to do that. And I think the regulator is trying to help with, guidance and all the stuff that's coming through that. That will be really interesting to see. And that could mean that more people get involved with the industry. I think that's a good thing. I think the
Sure.
government probably pushing that to make that happen. So hopefully some of the big guys who will come back in. We've seen recently, I think NatWest
That's right.
just came to the market and bought Evelyn, and that looks like they're going to come back in and be involved. Let's hope more of that comes in, which is strange for us. It's obviously ultimately competition for us, but we as
Yeah.
an industry,
Yeah.
we need these big guys to come back so that the pipeline of youngsters have got jobs to learn and access these clients, and maybe we can start to deal with more than 9% of the marketplace.
Right. Oh, that's good. Yes, that's right. NetWest. I think, yeah, I saw it February the 8th or 9th. I think they mentioned that they were acquiring or buying Evelyn
That's
Partners
right,
for
yeah.
quite a significant fee.
Big number. Yeah, big
Yeah. And then NatWest doing that. Do you think that will potentially open up maybe some new roles or some space for new blood to come
I
in?
hope so. I think that's hopefully the intention. I think the signals from the regulators to try to make, if you think about it, for me, if a client comes along and wants to put £20,000 into an ISA, I have to do a lot of work to get
Yeah,
that
sure,
through. Attitude to risk, suitability letter, um, so many different checks, so much paperwork that's why people can't deal with that anymore. So you
sure.
need to use a combination of technology and people and process so that
Yeah,
we can actually look after these people. And I think that the regulator, with a nudge from the government, are actually looking at that and trying to find ways to simplify. Again, going back in history, regulation has gone from one extreme to the other. When I first started, basically, we didn't have any. And then we've gone so far one way that actually it's pushed a huge amount of people into this savings gap. And, and,
right.
and I think what they're trying to achieve is to try and push that back. So somebody like NatWest and the Evelyn deal, and I think there'll be other things like that to happen. What they're
Mm,
looking at is saying, okay, if there's a way that we can get to market to access maybe some of the smaller clients, but we can do it in a way that's profitable, because ultimately these are all businesses, they're not charities, then
yeah, of course.
then maybe they will come back to market. Then they do need people with a combination of technology, which is obviously never going to
Yeah,
go away now.
no, it's true. So, yeah, and going back just quickly on the referral side of things and the trust issue, that we talked about. Um, I mean, do you think today, in 2026, that uh, majority or the number of advisory firms, they have structured, systemized, ways of generating referrals? Of it's still very much the informal
Yeah.
uh, sort of meet across the industry. You know what I mean? Like it's who you know, not what you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, I think so. I think especially, well, I think at all levels really, there's very few firms. There are some, but they're the exception rather than the rule. I think most firms are, they've been around a long time, or advisors have been around a long time. Average age 58. Still just staying under it just. So that's good.
Every
Only
year.
just, only just.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I don't think there are, you know, very many firms with a referral program out there. I don't
Right.
really think about it, and
Interesting.
they should be. You should be having your target market. I'm as bad as anybody. I've been very lucky in my working career because I've worked largely with accountants. So my role has always been to get work from them.
Sure.
But as you started this conversation, if you don't have that, then you need to find other ways of getting work through,
Sure.
and building up that trust.
Sure. So yeah, I mean that brings the human element, which is a big favorite of mine.
Yeah.
Um, as I said, people are the source, technology is the tool. There's no getting away from that. So moving forward, I think it's difficult to find the balance, between that human element and using the technology. And we talked about that and what my broker's app provides, and hopefully that does provide that balance. The other thing that we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and that I've read an article, I think in one of the PA 360 articles recently, is client time versus regulations for advisors. I've read a lot and heard a lot that advisors, they're saying they're not getting enough time, or face time with their clients due to, all the all the work and regulations and paperwork, like you mentioned, that they have to do. And with the introduction of consumer duty and the other compliant sort of stuff, what do you think firms could do to protect that client time? How can they maximize that in the with all the other things that that they have to follow?
I think it is very difficult, and consumer duty was the big issue for a lot of, especially big firms, because suddenly they were in a situation where they had to, you know, prove that they were doing some work for the money they were being paid. I mean, heaven
Right.
forbid, hey, heaven forbid. Um, but
Yeah.
what it does do, again, regulation for everybody means that suddenly you're going to see a client and you're having to write to them every year and confirm something that they already know and tell them stuff that they've already been told 3 times before in the same year. And it just
Sure.
costs you more time and more money. And
Right.
so when you're dealing with somebody with 20, 30, 40,000 pounds, it's almost impossible to look after those clients properly because it
Yeah.
just isn't profitable, which comes back to this whole loop of how do you deal
Yeah.
with smaller clients
Yeah.
and 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 give them a good service. But that is a very difficult thing to do. So technology has got to be one of the answers moving
Sure.
forward. A lot of our time as advisors and our team's time is spent dealing with providers. So you see a new client, you need a letter of authority for five
Sure.
different pensions and two
Yeah.
ISAs. Then you get the client to sign them largely in blood because the providers don't take it in any other way. Then you
Yeah.
send it off to them and then they lose it. And then you send it again and then they don't
Sure.
send you any info. Then you chase it. Then you get
Yeah.
57 pages of nonsense with only needed two. And then somebody at our end has to decipher it all and then put it all together.
Sure.
There is technology that's partly already out there and
Yeah.
partly will be coming that will deal with the letters of authority, will take the information and put it into a suitability letter, and that
Yeah.
will streamline those systems a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and that will take away partly what the advisor does, but a lot of the stuff that the admin teams do, and
Yeah.
therefore maybe those admin people can do other stuff that the advisor might be doing. Because ultimately, what you want to get to is the advisor. All he does is what he's good at: is talk to his clients. That's
Yeah.
the aim. So
Yeah. Sure.
if you can automate as much as possible, and this is not necessarily today, but over the next few years, I think this becomes easier and easier. Automate more and more of the back office stuff, and then
Yeah.
staff you've got do other things, client
Allow you to get
relations,
on, do the
value,
job.
yeah, value
Yeah.
stuff. So all people like me do is the easy bit, which is go and talk to the clients and then feed that back. Then I think that
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Some of the there's some other bits, I've been trialing some stuff with a firm called Aveni, which is just dictation really. But you record the meeting and then pulls through to some notes, which you then can, it's 80-90% right, but then you can immediately links to a back office, in our case, IO. Um, and you can save it in there. It just saves a bit of time. It's not perfect, but these things are
Sure.
all evolving.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, no. I mean, as we talked about, that's it's important, and there are systems out there. I think you mentioned in, I think, one of your interviews on PATV, that you found it's still a lot quite muddled, I think was the word you used, and we get that. So
Yeah,
but there is, as some technology that which is auditable. So they can, whatever you put through, which would also alleviate the consumer duty pressure,
yeah.
because you're able to do it,
Prove prove what
in
you've
the
done.
palm of
Yeah,
your hand.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and and if you can provide uh, proof that you've been in contact, you've given the service that you're supposed to be, doing, and you'll be able to do it with palm of the hand connectivity via an app would be, is great. And it is coming. So yes, I
And
totally
and
agree
and
with
I
you.
think what you describe is completely true. Most advisors see their clients all the time, but if it's, as what do they say? If it's not written down, then it didn't exist. And from a regulatory
Right.
point of view, that's the point, isn't it? It needs to be saved on a system somewhere to say that you've done what you said you've done.
Right.
And if you can
Yeah.
use technology in a way to enable that, then that's got to be a way forward and save people lots of time and anguish, quite frankly, down the line.
It's no longer just a piece of paper with their signature and a check. It's
Absolutely.
not.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
they were the easy days,
In
I
the good
imagine.
old days, we didn't even ever have to do letters, we just got checks, you know?
Oh,
Long time ago.
well, maybe you should revisit
Yeah, yeah.
this
Yeah, not sure the
this
regulator
this
lets do that.
yeah. Well, yeah, so, yeah, talking about the good old days, obviously that brings, say, again, the aging population demographic that we talked upon, talked about earlier. Um, and a lot of my work, talking with, financial advisories, uh, is trying to discover and understand, how what plans do they have in place as for the business to mitigate key person risks, succession, if they had to, if, for example, the leader of the firm who's built relationships, personality led rather than system led, when he chooses to exit, for example, how is that going to, how does does he sell the business? And if he does, are the business value multiples where they should be? If he hasn't got, technology involved, what I'm asking is, how do you, for example, you just said you're not far from 58, you're still well below, but
Yeah, yeah.
when you choose to exit, whenever that is, do you have a strategy? Do you have an exit strategy in place?
I think, I've still got a couple more years left in me,
Good.
but I think what you need to do is you need to bring new advisors on board,
Okay.
and there has to be a period, me and most of the financial planning world that's dealt with their clients for years are very, very loyal to who we work for. Our clients mean a lot to us because you build up long-term trust and you get
Sure.
to be part of their lives. So the last thing that we all want to make money. That's part of what we do it for, but also we want to make sure that they're looked after. So, you've got to be sure if you're going to sell your business, you're selling to the right people. And I think in my mind, I would bring somebody on board a year before I was going to retire and slowly introduce those to my clients over a period of time, and maybe then
Sure.
still be around for another 6 months to a year to, if needed, just to go to meetings, just to be there, just to reassure people. So I think it's something that needs to be planned for,
Yeah.
rather than, right, I'm off to Barbados now, off you go. Because no,
I'm gonna go.
Ed,
Yeah.
I know lots of advisors that they're a pretty good bunch of people largely, and they want to do the best for their clients, want to make sure they're
Sure.
looked after.
I mean, I would think I agree, and I think, a year, I would say it would be a minimum in order to, really build up that,
Yeah.
that relationship to introduce, because, you know, if we don't see if we don't see an increase in younger talent in the industry, what do you think happens?
Well, it just gets worse and worse. The whole savings gap gets worse and worse. We're into a place where people just stop saving. With the involvement or the bringing forward of auto enrollment was a good thing because it got at least got people to put money into pensions at a certain level. Unfortunately,
Sure.
nobody understands what they're invested in most of the time, so that's a real issue. It's completely true because people
Yeah.
do the bare minimum and don't necessarily explain things to people, but actually people do stop saving, or they do what the government is trying to stop people doing is they save into cash, which actually over the long term isn't the right thing to do. We all know that, but you
Sure.
need somebody to explain to you that actually, getting a 2% return on your cash rate when inflation is 3.5 means technically you are actually losing money.
Yeah.
But people don't see it that way. They see the balance go up and there's no risk, and they don't understand the value of investing over the long term. And so if there's less and less people out there, we either get to a point where it's just really big organizations, the consolidators just pick this stuff up,
Right. Yeah.
and that's probably where we get to. But actually, I'm slightly biased, but a lot of the small, really well-run quality firms out there give great value.
Sure.
We want to make sure we can keep those going, but we do need find new. Definitely do need to find ways of bringing in new talent into this industry. And as a collective, we need to find a better way of doing it, which for God knows how many years now we haven't managed to do.
No. I mean, going back just very quickly to that, you were talking about the savings gap, etc., and the fact that most people have got like a cash ISA or something that, like you say, they're actually losing money, but because it goes up a couple of quid or whatever it might be. they're okay. Do you think there's a fear factor at all where I think money and investing is concerned?
Yeah.
I mean,
But I
I
think,
think
yeah, I think that's, again, it's a good point. You know,
it
the
might be lack of knowledge, perhaps. I
it is a
suppose.
lack of, it's a lack of knowledge. It's a lack of understanding of tax. It's a lack of understanding of what long-term returns could be, and because they've got nobody to talk to, you know?
Right.
If you go back in history, oh god, I'm so old. If you go back in history, you had somebody knocking on the door, and it was the man from the Peru. You know,
Yeah, that's right.
you had the Allied Dunbars, you had the various, you know, I'll come back to it. The contracts were pretty terrible, but actually, lots of us have built off the back of people knocking on people's doors and people
It
putting
was,
down
yeah,
into endowment plans because there was somebody there that they could trust and felt that they could put the money into. You know,
yeah.
we struggle with that part, and that's a big issue, I'm afraid. We need to find ways to actually, you know, get people to save again because people are nervous. And if you, prime example, you know, lots of people try to come into this industry with robo advice. If you remember a few years ago, everybody was going to do robo advice. Didn't work. Didn't work
No,
because you
no.
need a person. So the
Yeah,
key part, there's a great little business up in Barnsley called Lifetime, and what they're doing is they're doing a combination of coaches and financial advisors and technology. So you as a client would be assigned a coach and they look after you and they can do a little cash flow and they can talk about where you are. And then if you need to do anything regulatory, you can be assigned to an advisor and they do that. Then they use technology to get around consumer duty by all of the review process and everything else is done with technology and holograms. And it's really, really clever. And then the next time in your annual review meeting, when you see somebody completely different, you're not wedded to that particular coach or that particular advisor. You're wedded to the firm. And
yeah,
that to me makes sense. You've got to find ways of scaling that. Actually,
yes.
you've still got a person that you can talk to, but they can do this for £20,000, £30,000
Right.
investments.
For the lower values.
Smaller
Yeah,
themes, it's not for the high net worth people necessarily. I'm sure they do a great job with that. But for the smaller stuff, it would be, you know, you can be anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world as the advisor looking after
yeah.
people. And to me, that hybrid solution is a great answer, and I think more and more of that's gonna hopefully come forward.
That sounds fascinating. I know you did touch on Lifetime when we spoke 2 weeks ago, and I found that fascinating because for me personally, I wouldn't know where to start or who to speak to. Well, you now
Yeah,
obviously,
exactly,
if
yeah.
I had a if I had a lump sum and thought rather than shove it in a 20 grand in a cash ISA, what opportunities are out there? What exactly can I put my money into? And I don't know. I wouldn't right now. I don't know where to go or where to find those answers. So, I think me mentioning perhaps, the fear factor, it's a, lack of knowledge. It's,
Yeah.
I just don't know. And what I want to know is what are, the big firms or the smaller firms, what are they actually doing to get it into the public domain that there are opportunities and it isn't scary.
Yeah. Well, again, I think, you know, it all stems maybe from the early stages. You're almost getting into the schools, aren't you? And actually the education from
Okay.
children and the curriculum and what happens there, because none of this stuff is talked about or, you know, basic tax stuff and things like that. Things that actually kids really need to understand and never really talked about. Um, but again, you know, it's the difficulty for our industry is it needs the big boys to do this because
Okay.
the financial planning community is largely lots of small little businesses.
Sure.
So you need the big, you know, your JP Morgans who bought Nutmeg. They're doing
Yeah.
lots of advertising. That's great. I don't have a problem with any of this stuff. I don't view it as competition. We just need more and more people to understand actually there's another option. Because actually what you would do as a sort of a typical person there, you've got some money, you end up talking to your bank and you might do 20 grand into your cash ISA, 12 grand coming forward soon, and then you'll find the best savings rate, you know,
Yeah.
and that's it, you know, because you go, well, I'm a bit worried about putting into that S&P 500 thing or that FTSE 100. I'm not quite sure what that all is.
Yeah.
and that could go down, can't it? So, or you go the other way if you're kids and you look at all of the influencers on there and put it all into Bitcoin, which is the other
Yeah.
problem, the other end, you know?
Yes, of course. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Yeah, I just found it fascinating. And of course, I mean, you're right. JP Morgan, Fisher Investments, and there's St James's Place. I've seen and heard, adverts for them on the radio and on TV. So they're there, but if there's it's just there doesn't seem to be enough traction or enough visibility for the average Joe like me to actually know where am I going to put what are my options.
Absolutely,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
luckily I've now met you, and it could
Exactly.
well be an
You'll
opportunity.
be fine. You'll be fine.
Yeah, but I've only got you for a few years because
Yeah, that's right,
then
yeah.
you
I've
and
got at
then
least 5 more in me, you know.
and
You're
then
right.
yeah,
You're right for a
and then
while.
you're off, and then you'll be off to La Manga, La Touquet, and all the other places.
Just
So
just playing
to
bad golf somewhere.
yeah, that's good. Um, so yeah, that's really really good. What I wanted to talk to you about or ask you a question about now is we talked about exiting and succession and that sort of thing, and I wanted to see get your take on firm business value multiples and the succession side of things. So I've written something down here that I saw, and it was when advisory firms talk about succession or exit planning. Um, business valuation, of course, will be a key topic. Um, what drives, in your opinion, what drives that firm valuation?
Okay. I think more and more it's becoming a bit more sophisticated. The days of just 3 times recurring income or 4 times recurring income, that still happens. That is still definitely out there. But I think more and more of the firms are looking at things like the book of business, the age of the clients and the longevity of those clients. You know, if you've got loads of clients who are in their 70s and 80s, then the value of that book really should be a lot less than it should be if you've got people in their 40s and their 50s. I know that's not
Okay.
rocket science, but it's sort of, people don't, people have never really used to talk about that type of thing, but they do now. I think process and systems is really important. I think, again, the consolidators, the old model was where you've got somebody that's been paying 0.5%, we'll stick them up to 1%. So it doesn't really matter because we'll make a load more money on it. But that's becoming harder and harder to do because there's less firms out there to consolidate, quite frankly. So
Yeah.
the only way you can make money and increase where you are is by using technology and systems to reduce your costs,
Sure.
slim things down to enable advisors to see more clients and onboard things moving forward. And I think if firms get their business ready for sale, and they need to do this way before they're actually selling it, but be in a situation where actually they do have the systems in place. They do have their client proposition. They do know their numbers.
Yeah.
When they talk to people, the value of that is going to go up a lot more than it
Sure.
is just saying, "Here's my Excel spreadsheet and here's a load of files."
Yeah. No, this
That still does happen.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. But obviously, I totally agree with you. It's kind of hit the nail on the head. What you said. It is without a doubt. It is about planning. Across the board because, like you say, if it is the key person risk, it's been personality led for 30, 40 years, and they haven't introduced, maybe technology or systems that allow, one touch communication via mobile apps or anything, something like that. And let's say they haven't brought on any some more younger blood, whether it be via the government apprenticeship schemes or anything else like that, then those multiples are gonna be lower than
Yeah.
they probably expected. So yeah, that's a key thing. Well, that's great. Listen, we're gonna come to a close shortly, but before I do, I wanted to ask if you had any advice for, younger generation coming into the industry, what advice will you give them to get into the business?
I think there are very, very few roles in life where you can get such satisfaction in helping people and, quite frankly, earn good money. There's not many things that you can get paid well for if you do a good job, where you can get paid well along the line. If you build your own business, you get value at the end. but ultimately you get huge satisfaction in helping people. If you're not the person that really likes helping people, it's probably the wrong role for you. But I love dealing with my clients. I love my job. I hate the compliance stuff. I hate all of that rubbish that you have to do around it. But actually seeing people and talking to people and getting to know them, there's not many greater jobs. I'd prefer to have been a professional footballer, but just wasn't good enough. So this has worked well for me over, God, 30 odd years. And I'm incredibly lucky to have met so many people and done so many things because of this industry. And that's why I always say to people, it's a great industry. We do so many great things, not me, but as a community, the financial planning community, that people do so many great things. And, we're just not very good at telling people, sort of best kept secret, I think, sometimes. So
Right.
to youngsters, I would say, please get involved. It's a great job.
No, brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for your time and your pearls of wisdom as always.
Sure about that. No,
I look forward to our next meeting,
yeah,
and whenever that may be.
yeah, no,
Maybe
no
on the
problem.
golf course
Yeah,
in the 19th. That's what I wanted to ask you. So, over the course of my business career, I've done deals in the 19th
yeah.
at a golf club. Has that happened for
I,
you in the IFA industry?
I've got a couple of clients because of the golf clubs.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely helped. That's my excuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got to go to the golf club.
So, yeah,
I've got to see a client. No, it's good. All right.
absolutely. Absolutely. Works
Well,
well.
listen, thanks again for your time, and, we'll catch up soon.
No, pleasure, Lawrence. Lovely to see you. Take care.
This episode is sponsored by My Brokers app, a white label app built specifically for financial advisors and wealth management professionals. If you want to know how you can have your own app exclusively for your business and your clients up and running by this time next week, visit mybrokers.app or download the free My Brokers demo app from your favorite app store.